Europe's most celebrated organ transplant specialist, had never lost a patient during surgery. A record so extraordinary that medical schools across the continent sent their brightest students to study under her tutelage. Helena Ashford had revolutionized the field of organ replacement in ways that seemed to defy the limitations of 18th-century medicine, performing procedures with success rates that bordered on the miraculous. Her reputation preceded her into every operating theater, every medical conference, and every desperate plea from families whose loved ones faced certain death without her intervention. Let us know where you're watching from, and what time it is for you in the comments. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from all corners of the world. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft hum in the background. And let's begin our journey together tonight. The morning mist clung to the ancient oaks surrounding Ashford Manor like ghostly fingers reluctant to release their hold on the sprawling estate that had dominated the Yorkshire countryside for 3 generations. From the winding cobblestone path that led to the imposing Tudor facade, the manor appeared as a sanctuary of healing and restoration. Its ivy-covered walls and diamond-paned windows promising respite from the ailments that plagued Europe's wealthiest families. The carefully manicured gardens bloomed with medicinal herbs whose fragrances seemed designed to inspire confidence in the establishment's therapeutic capabilities. Dr. Helena Ashford had inherited the manor from her physician father, whose own reputation for treating the afflictions of nobility had established the family name as synonymous with medical excellence. However, where her father had relied on traditional remedies and conservative surgical techniques, Helena had pushed the boundaries of medical science into territories that her contemporaries considered impossible, if not blasphemous. Her success in organ transplantation had begun during her studies in Edinburgh, where she had developed techniques for preserving organs outside the human body for extended periods, allowing for complex surgical procedures that required hours of meticulous work. The transformation of Ashford Manor from a traditional family estate into Europe's most exclusive wellness retreat had been accomplished with remarkable efficiency and attention to detail. Helena had commissioned renovations that converted the manor's east wing into luxurious accommodation suites, each appointed with amenities that rivaled the finest hotels in London or Paris. The ground floor featured consultation rooms where she would meet with prospective patients, their families draped in the finest silks and their conversations conducted in hushed tones that conveyed both hope and desperation in equal measure. What distinguished Ashford Manor from other medical establishments was Helena's revolutionary approach to patient care, which she had termed comprehensive wellness restoration. Rather than simply treating specific ailments, she proposed to address the entire spectrum of factors that contributed to her patients' declining health. This holistic methodology required extended stays at the manor, typically lasting several weeks, during which patients would undergo a carefully orchestrated program of treatments, dietary modifications, and surgical interventions designed to restore them to optimal physical condition. The first guests to arrive at the newly renovated Ashford Manor had been Lord Pembroke and his wife, both suffering from ailments that London's most respected physicians had declared incurable. Lord Pembroke's liver had been ravaged by decades of excessive drinking, while Lady Pembroke faced the slow deterioration of her kidneys, a condition that left her pale and weak despite her relatively young age of 42. They had traveled to Yorkshire with a retinue of servants and considerable skepticism, having exhausted every conventional treatment available in the Empire's medical centers. Helena had received them with the practiced grace of someone accustomed to managing the expectations of aristocratic patients, while maintaining the professional authority necessary to direct their care. Her initial consultations with the Pembrokes had lasted hours, during which she had conducted examinations far more thorough than any they had previously experienced. She had explained her treatment philosophy with confidence that bordered on arrogance, detailing procedures and outcomes that seemed too remarkable to be credible, yet were delivered with such clinical precision that doubt seemed almost impertinent. The manor's staff had been selected with careful attention to both their professional qualifications and their discretion regarding the establishment's more unconventional practices. The head nurse, Miss Blackwood, had been recruited from Edinburgh's Royal Infirmary, where her expertise in post-surgical care had been matched only by her willingness to follow instructions without asking uncomfortable questions. The supporting medical staff included practitioners who had found themselves professionally marginalized due to their interest in experimental procedures that mainstream medicine considered ethically questionable. Dr. Helena's success in treating the Pembrokes had exceeded even her own optimistic predictions. Within a month of their arrival at the manor, both patients had shown remarkable improvement in their conditions, with Lord Pembroke's liver function returning to levels not seen in years and Lady Pembroke's kidney disease showing signs of complete reversal. The couple had departed Yorkshire with renewed vigor and health that made them appear decades younger than their chronological ages, their gratitude expressed through generous financial donations and enthusiastic recommendations to their social circles. Word of the miraculous recoveries at Ashford Manor had spread through European high society with the speed of wildfire, creating a demand for Helena's services that far exceeded the manor's capacity to accommodate new patients. Letters of inquiry arrived daily from noble families across the continent, each describing desperate medical situations and expressing willingness to pay any price for access to the revolutionary treatments that had restored the Pembrokes to perfect health. Helena found herself in the enviable position of being able to select her patients from among Europe's wealthiest and most influential families. The expansion of the manor's facilities had been undertaken with the same attention to luxury and comfort that had characterized the initial renovations. Additional guest suites had been constructed in the manor's west wing, each designed to provide maximum privacy and comfort for patients who valued discretion as highly as medical excellence. The dining facilities had been enhanced to accommodate larger numbers of guests, with menus designed by chefs trained in the preparation of foods that would complement various therapeutic regimens. Most significantly, Helena had overseen the construction of extensive basement facilities that would house the advanced medical equipment necessary for her most complex procedures. These subterranean chambers had been excavated with remarkable depth and sophistication, featuring multiple operating theaters equipped with the finest surgical instruments available in Europe. The basement levels included recovery rooms where patients could convalesce in complete privacy, storage areas for medical supplies, and specialized chambers designed for procedures that required absolute sterility and controlled environmental condition. The success of Helena's early cases had attracted the attention of medical practitioners from across Europe, many of whom had requested permission to observe her surgical techniques and study her treatment methodologies. However, Helena had consistently declined such requests, explaining that her procedures required absolute concentration and that the presence of observers would compromise the sterile conditions necessary for optimal outcomes. This policy of exclusion had only served to enhance the mystery surrounding her methods while reinforcing her reputation as a medical innovator whose techniques were too advanced for conventional understanding. As the manor's reputation continued to grow, Helena had begun to notice patterns in the types of patients who sought her services. The majority suffered from organ failure or systemic diseases that conventional medicine could not address, conditions that typically required organ replacement or extensive surgical intervention to resolve. Interestingly, a significant portion of her prospective patients were accompanied by family members or companions who appeared to be in excellent health, individuals who expressed interest in the manor's wellness programs despite having no apparent medical needs. The development of the manor's wellness program had been a natural extension of Helena's holistic approach to patient care. She had recognized that many of her patients' family members and companions could benefit from preventive treatments designed to maintain optimal health and prevent the development of conditions that might require future medical intervention. These wellness guests would participate in diagnostic evaluations, nutritional consultations, and minor therapeutic procedures designed to optimize their physical condition and enhance their natural vitality. The integration of medical patients and wellness guests had created a unique dynamic at Ashford Manor, with both groups participating in social activities and recreational programs that fostered a sense of community among the residents. Helena had encouraged these interactions, believing that the positive energy generated by healthy individuals would contribute to the healing process experienced by those undergoing medical treatment. The manor's common areas had been designed to facilitate such interactions, with libraries, music rooms, and garden pavilions, where guests could gather for conversation and mutual support. The manor's sophisticated medical facilities included laboratories, where Helena could conduct extensive testing of blood samples and tissue specimens, obtained from both patient and wellness guests during routine examinations. These analyses allowed her to create detailed profiles of each guest's organ characteristics, identifying those individuals whose organs would provide optimal matches for patients requiring transplantation. The process was conducted with such discretion that guests remained unaware that they were being evaluated as potential organ sources, rather than simply receiving comprehensive health assessments. Helena's breakthrough in organ preservation had been achieved through years of experimentation with techniques that extended far beyond conventional medical practices. She had developed chemical solutions that could maintain organ viability outside the human body for periods that seemed impossible according to established medical understanding. These preservation methods allowed her to harvest organs from donors well in advance of transplantation procedures, providing the flexibility necessary to coordinate complex surgical schedules and ensure optimal outcomes for her paying patients. The selection process for identifying suitable organ donors among the manor's wellness guests required careful consideration of multiple factors beyond simple tissue compatibility. Helena needed to ensure that the removal of organs could be accomplished without raising suspicions among other guests or staff members who were not privy to the true nature of the manor's operations. This requirement led her to focus on guests who had minimal social connections, limited family members who might investigate their disappearance, and financial circumstances that would make their sudden departure from the manor seem plausible. The transformation of Ashford Manor into Europe's most exclusive medical retreat had been accomplished through a combination of genuine medical innovation and carefully concealed criminal enterprise. Helena's reputation as a miracle worker was built upon real surgical skills and legitimate medical breakthroughs, but these achievements were supported by a systematic program of organ harvesting that treated human beings as renewable resources for the benefit of wealthy patients willing to pay extraordinary sums for restored health. As the first phase of Helena's operation reached its peak efficiency, the manor had established itself as a destination where the impossible became routine and the hopeless found salvation. The waiting list for admission extended months into the future, with noble families competing for the privilege of accessing treatments that could restore youth, eliminate disease, and extend life beyond its natural boundaries. None of these grateful patients suspected that their miraculous recoveries were purchased with the lives of individuals who had trusted Helena with their own pursuit of perfect health. The stage was set for an expansion of operations that would transform Helena's already remarkable success into an enterprise of unprecedented scope and horror. The techniques she had perfected at Ashford Manor represented only the beginning of possibilities that would ultimately challenge the very foundations of medical ethics and human dignity. The miracle doctor had proven that anything was possible when moral constraints were abandoned in favor of results that spoke for themselves, and the results she had achieved were nothing short of extraordinary. The basement levels of Ashford Manor represented a triumph of engineering and medical innovation that existed in complete contradiction to the elegant wellness retreat that occupied the floors above. Dr. Helena Ashford had spared no expense in creating subterranean facilities that could accommodate the most complex surgical procedures while maintaining absolute secrecy from the manor's unsuspecting guests. The construction had required the services of specialized craftsmen who were paid generously for their expertise and their willingness to ask no questions about the unusual specifications they were required to fulfill. The main surgical theater occupied the central position in the basement complex, its vaulted ceiling rising nearly 20 feet to accommodate the sophisticated system of mirrors and lighting that Helena had designed to provide optimal visibility during delicate procedures. The walls were lined with white marble that could be easily sterilized, while the floor featured drainage systems that allowed for efficient cleanup of any materials that might accumulate during surgical operations. Multiple operating tables had been positioned throughout the space, each equipped with restraining mechanisms that could secure patients during procedures that might cause involuntary movement. Surrounding the main theater were smaller specialized chambers, designed for specific aspects of Helena's revolutionary medical practice. One room housed the chemical baths where organs could be preserved in solutions that maintained their viability for extended periods, allowing for careful scheduling of transplant procedures without the time constraints that limited conventional surgical practice. Another chamber contained the testing equipment necessary for analyzing tissue compatibility between potential donors and recipients, ensuring that each organ would integrate seamlessly into its new biological environment. The most remarkable feature of the basement complex was the series of recovery rooms where patients could convalesce in complete isolation from the manor's regular activities. These chambers had been designed to provide optimal healing environments while preventing any interaction between post-surgical patients and the wellness guests who remained unaware of the medical procedures taking place beneath their feet. Each recovery room was equipped with monitoring devices that allowed Helena and her staff to observe patients' progress without entering the chambers unnecessarily. The selection process for identifying suitable organ donors among the manor's wellness guests had evolved into a precise science that combined medical expertise with psychological manipulation. Helena had discovered that the most successful donations came from individuals who possessed not only the required physiological characteristics, but also personality traits that made them unlikely to resist or complicate the harvesting procedures. She preferred guests who demonstrated trusting natures, limited social connections, and financial circumstances that would make their sudden departure from the manor seem reasonable to outside observers. Mrs. Evangeline Hartwell had arrived at Ashford Manor in the early autumn, seeking wellness treatments that might address the chronic fatigue that had plagued her since her husband's death the previous year. The wealthy widow had inherited substantial properties, but had few remaining family members who might inquire closely into her whereabouts or activities. Her lonely circumstances and generous nature had made her particularly popular among the manor's other guests, who appreciated her willingness to listen to their concerns and offer comfort during their own health challenges. Helena had identified Mrs. Hartwell as an ideal candidate for organ donation within days of her arrival. Recognizing that the widow's excellent physical condition and compatible tissue markers would make her an invaluable resource for several patients requiring different types of transplant procedures. The psychological profile that Helena had developed during their consultation sessions revealed a woman whose trusting nature and desire to help others would make her unlikely to resist requests for additional medical testing or procedures presented as beneficial to her own health. The preparation of donors for organ harvesting required careful timing and sophisticated deception to ensure that the procedures could be completed without alerting other guests or staff members to the true nature of the manor's operations. Helena had developed protocols that began with routine medical examinations that gradually became more invasive and comprehensive, allowing her to map each donor's anatomical characteristics and identify optimal approaches for organ removal. These preparatory procedures were presented as advanced diagnostic techniques designed to detect potential health issues before they could develop into serious conditions. Mrs. Hartwell's preparation had begun with blood tests that Helena claimed were necessary to evaluate her immune system function and identify any underlying nutritional deficiencies that might be contributing to her fatigue. The widow had agreed readily to these examinations, trusting in Helena's reputation and expertise, while remaining unaware that the blood samples were being used to confirm tissue compatibility with multiple patients awaiting organ transplantation. Additional tests followed over several weeks, each presented as a logical progression in her wellness evaluation. The manor's staff had been trained to assist with the harvesting procedures, while maintaining the discretion necessary to preserve the establishment's reputation as a legitimate medical facility. Mrs. Blackwood, the head nurse, had developed protocols for managing donors during the final phases of preparation, ensuring that they remained comfortable and compliant while the necessary surgical arrangements were completed. The supporting staff included individuals whose own circumstances made them dependent on Helena's continued goodwill, creating a network of accomplices who were unlikely to betray the operation's secrets. The actual harvesting procedure had been scheduled for a moonless night when the manor's regular activities were minimal and the risk of discovery was reduced to acceptable levels. Helena had informed Mrs. Hartwell that she would undergo a minor procedure designed to address some irregularities that had been discovered during her recent examinations, explaining that the surgery would be performed during nighttime hours to minimize disruption to her daily activities. The widow had expressed complete confidence in Helena's judgment, requesting only that she be allowed to write letters to distant relatives before the procedure. The basement surgical theater had been prepared with the meticulous attention to detail that characterized all of Helena's professional activities. The preservation solutions had been heated to optimal temperatures, the surgical instruments had been arranged in precise configurations, and the drainage systems had been tested to ensure efficient operation during the extended procedure that would be required to harvest multiple organs from a single donor. Helena had reviewed the requirements of her waiting patients, confirming that Miss Hartwell's organs would provide life-saving treatments for 3 individuals, whose families had already transferred substantial payments for the procedures. Mrs. Hartwell had been escorted to the basement surgical theater by Mrs. Blackwood, who had administered a mild sedative that the donor believed was designed to help her relax before the minor procedure that Helena had described. The widow had remained conscious but compliant as she was positioned on the operating table, her trust in Helena's expertise preventing her from questioning the unusual nature of the surgical environment, or the presence of multiple preservation tanks that surrounded the operating area. Helena had begun the procedure with the precision and confidence that had made her reputation as Europe's most skilled transplant surgeon. The techniques she employed were based on methods she had perfected over years of experimentation, allowing her to remove organs with minimal damage while maintaining their viability for transplantation into recipient patients. The process required several hours of careful work during which Mrs. Hartwell's organs were systematically harvested and placed in preservation solutions that would maintain their condition until the transplant procedures could be performed. The disposal of Mrs. Hartwell's remains had been accomplished through methods that Helena had developed to ensure that no evidence of the harvesting procedure would be discovered by authorities or curious guests. The manor's basement included a specialized chamber where chemical processes could reduce organic materials to components that could be safely disposed of through conventional waste management systems. These procedures left no trace of the donors who had provided organs for Helena's transplant operations, allowing her to maintain the fiction that departed guests had simply completed their wellness programs and returned to their home. The success of the harvesting operation had been measured not only by the quality of the organs obtained, but also by the seamless continuation of the manor's normal activities without any disruption or suspicion among the remaining guests. Helena had prepared explanations for Miss Hartwell's sudden departure, describing urgent family matters that had required her immediate return to London. The widow's room had been cleaned and prepared for the next guest, while her personal belongings had been carefully sorted and stored in ways that supported the cover story of her hasty departure. The 3 transplant procedures that utilized Mrs. Hartwell's organs had been performed over the following week, with each recipient recovering in the basement facilities while their families celebrated miraculous recoveries from conditions that had previously seemed hopeless. Lord Ashworth had received a kidney that restored his health completely, while Lady Pemberton's heart condition had been resolved through a transplant that left her feeling younger and more energetic than she had in decades. The 3rd recipient, a merchant prince from Venice, had traveled to Yorkshire specifically for the liver transplant that would allow him to continue his profitable but physically demanding lifestyle. The financial success of these procedures had exceeded Helena's already optimistic projections, with the 3 families expressing their gratitude through payments that totaled more than most physicians would earn in several lifetimes. Additionally, their recommendations to other wealthy families facing similar medical challenges had generated a waiting list of potential patients that extended months into the future. Helena had recognized that the demand for her services far exceeded her current capacity to provide organs, leading her to consider expansions of the harvesting operation that would allow her to accommodate more patients simultaneously. The psychological impact of successfully completing her first systematic harvesting operation had been profound for Helena, confirming her belief that conventional medical ethics were obstacles to achieving results that truly mattered. The transformation of Mrs. Hartwell from a living person into a collection of life-saving organs had been accomplished with efficiency and precision that demonstrated the superiority of practical problem-solving over abstract moral consideration. Helena had proven to herself that she possessed the intellectual capacity and emotional detachment necessary to operate beyond the limitations that constrained ordinary physician. The expansion of the harvesting operation had required careful consideration of logistical challenges that went beyond the simple medical aspects of organ removal and transplantation. Helena needed to develop systems for identifying and acquiring suitable donors in quantities sufficient to meet the growing demand from wealthy patients throughout Europe. This requirement led her to establish relationships with individuals who could provide access to potential donors through various forms of deception and coercion, creating a network that extended far beyond the confines of Ashford Manor. The manor's reputation as a wellness retreat had proven to be an ideal cover for the harvesting operation, attracting individuals who possessed the health and vitality that made them valuable as organ sources while providing legitimate explanations for their presence at the facility. Helena had recognized that the combination of medical treatment and wellness services allowed her to evaluate potential donors thoroughly while maintaining the pretense of providing beneficial healthcare services. This approach had enabled her to build a sustainable operation that could continue indefinitely without attracting unwanted attention from authorities or medical colleagues. The development of more sophisticated preservation techniques had allowed Helena to maintain harvested organs in viable condition for extended periods, providing flexibility in scheduling transplant procedures and enabling her to stockpile organs from multiple donors when opportunities presented themselves. These advances had been achieved through experimentation that pushed the boundaries of chemical and biological science, resulting in methods that far exceeded anything available to conventional medical practitioners. Helena had become not only a skilled surgeon but also an innovative researcher whose discoveries could revolutionize the field of organ transplantation if they were ever shared with the broader medical community. The success of the harvesting operation had attracted the attention of wealthy individuals throughout Europe, who were seeking treatments for conditions that conventional medicine could not address. Helena had begun receiving inquiries from noble families whose members suffered from various forms of organ failure, genetic conditions, and age-related deterioration that could potentially be resolved through transplant procedure. The diversity of these medical challenges had required her to develop expertise in multiple surgical specialties, expanding her capabilities far beyond her original focus on specific types of organ replacement. As the second phase of Helena's operation reached its full potential, Ashford Manor had established itself as a destination where medical miracles were routine and impossible recoveries became commonplace. The basement facilities had been expanded to accommodate increasing numbers of procedures, while the upper levels of the manor continued to provide the luxury accommodations and wellness services that attracted both patients and potential donors. Helena had created a self-sustaining system that generated enormous profits while providing genuine medical benefits to those who could afford her services, albeit at costs that extended far beyond mere financial consideration. The foundation had been laid for operations that would eventually encompass multiple facilities and international networks of suppliers and customers. Helena's success at Ashford Manor represented only the beginning of possibilities that would ultimately challenge every conventional understanding of medical practice and human dignity. The perfect harvest had proven that anything was achievable when traditional moral constraints were replaced by practical considerations based on results and profitability. The transformation of Ashford Manor's upper levels into Europe's most luxurious wellness retreat had been accomplished with meticulous attention to every detail that would convince guests they were experiencing the pinnacle of health optimization and medical care. Helena Ashford had invested enormous sums in creating an environment that would appeal to the refined sensibilities of aristocratic guests, while providing the perfect cover for the more sinister activities taking place in the facility's hidden depths. Every aspect of the manor's public areas had been designed to inspire confidence, relaxation, and an almost religious faith in the healing powers that Helena claimed to possess. The grand foyer welcomed guests with marble floors imported from Italian quarries, crystal chandeliers that cast prismatic rainbows across hand-painted frescoes depicting scenes of mythological healing, and fresh floral arrangements that filled the air with fragrances specifically chosen for their psychologically calming properties. The reception area featured comfortable seating arrangements where new arrivals could complete their registration procedures while sipping herbal teas that Helen claimed contained rare botanical extracts capable of immediately beginning the detoxification process that would restore their optimal health. Helena had commissioned the services of Europe's most renowned interior designers to create guest suites that rivaled the luxury accommodations available in the finest royal palaces. Each room featured silk wallpapers, mahogany furnishings crafted by master artisans, and private bathrooms equipped with copper bathtubs that could be filled with mineral-rich waters heated to precise temperatures for maximum therapeutic benefit. The windows offered carefully curated views of the manor's gardens, where medicinal herbs grew in geometric patterns that were said to promote healing through visual harmony and natural beauty. The dining facilities at Ashford Manor represented a revolutionary approach to nutrition that combined culinary excellence with therapeutic meal planning designed to address each guest's specific health challenges. Helena had recruited chefs from the finest restaurants in Paris and Vienna, training them in her proprietary methods for preparing foods that would optimize digestive function while providing the precise combinations of nutrients needed to support the body's natural healing processes. Each meal was individually crafted based on detailed analysis of the guest's medical condition and metabolic requirements. The daily schedule at the manor followed a carefully orchestrated program that balanced physical activities, medical treatments, and social interactions designed to create an atmosphere of purposeful healing and community support. Guests would begin each day with gentle exercises in the manor's conservatory, where rare plants from around the world created an environment that Helena claimed possessed natural air purification properties that would enhance respiratory function and mental clarity. These morning sessions were followed by individual consultations, where Helena would review each guest's progress and adjust their treatment plans accordingly. The medical consultation rooms had been designed to impress guests with displays of advanced equipment and rare medical texts that suggested Helena's access to knowledge and techniques unavailable to ordinary physicians. Cabinets lined with mysterious bottles and vials containing colorful substances hinted at remedies derived from exotic sources and ancient wisdom that conventional medicine had forgotten or never discovered. Helena would conduct these consultations wearing elaborate robes that combined the authority of academic medicine with the mystique of healing traditions that predated scientific understanding. Mrs. Charlotte Whitmore had arrived at Ashford Manor during the height of summer, seeking treatments for a collection of ailments that had left her feeling prematurely aged despite her 45 years. The wealthy widow had suffered from chronic digestive issues, recurring headaches, and a general fatigue that had resisted every treatment prescribed by London's most respected physicians. Her substantial inheritance from her late husband's shipping empire had made her an ideal candidate for Helena's most expensive treatment programs, while her isolated social circumstances made her presence at the manor unlikely to attract unwanted attention from concerned relatives. Helena had welcomed Mrs. Whitmore with the combination of professional authority and personal warmth that she had perfected for managing wealthy guests who required careful handling to maintain their cooperation throughout extended treatment programs. The initial consultation had lasted several hours, during which Helena had conducted examinations that appeared thorough and scientifically sophisticated, while actually serving to evaluate Mrs. Whitmore's suitability as a potential organ donor. The widow's excellent underlying health and compatible tissue characteristics had immediately identified her as a valuable resource for Helena's more lucrative medical procedures. The treatment program that Helena had designed for Mrs. Whitmore combined legitimate therapeutic interventions with preparatory procedures that would facilitate eventual organ harvesting while maintaining the appearance of comprehensive wellness care. The widow had been assigned to a suite in the manor's east wing, where her daily activities could be monitored discreetly, while she participated in the various treatments and social activities that comprised the standard wellness experience. Helena had explained that Miss Whitmore's complex health challenges would require an extended stay at the manor, possibly lasting several months, to achieve the dramatic improvements that she had promised. The other guests at Ashford Manor during Mrs. Whitmore's stay represented a carefully selected mixture of legitimate patients seeking medical treatment and potential organ donors whose health and circumstances made them suitable for Helena's harvesting operation. Lord Blackthorne had arrived seeking treatment for heart disease that threatened to end his productive life prematurely, while Lady Pemberton required kidney replacement to address a condition that had been gradually destroying her renal function. The presence of these obviously ill patients provided credible justification for the manor's medical activities while creating opportunities for Helena to demonstrate her miraculous healing abilities. Among the wellness guests who appeared to be in perfect health, several had been specifically recruited through carefully crafted invitations that appealed to their desire for preventive health care and social status. Mr. Ashworth, a young merchant whose family had recently acquired substantial wealth through successful trading ventures, had been attracted by the opportunity to associate with established aristocracy while receiving health services that would ensure his continued vitality and success. Miss Cornelia Fairchild, an unmarried heiress whose reclusive nature had limited her social connections, had been drawn to the manor by promises of treatments that would enhance her natural beauty and attract suitable marriage prospects. The daily routine at Ashford Manor had been designed to create a sense of community among the guests, while providing Helena with multiple opportunities to evaluate their medical conditions and psychological profiles. Morning exercises in the conservatory allowed her to observe their physical capabilities and identify any health issues that might affect their suitability as organ sources. Group meals provided insights into their social connections and family relationships, information that would be crucial for determining whether their disappearance would attract unwanted attention from outside authorities. The afternoon treatment sessions combined legitimate therapeutic procedures with medical evaluations that served Helena's hidden agenda. Guests received massages using exotic oils that Helena claimed possessed healing properties, while trained staff collected detailed information about their physical conditions and personal circumstances. Blood samples were routinely collected for what guests believed were comprehensive health assessments, but which actually provided the tissue typing information necessary for organ compatibility evaluation. Helena had developed sophisticated psychological techniques for managing guests who might become suspicious of the manor's activities or resistant to the increasingly invasive medical procedures that were required for her harvesting operation. She had learned to identify personality types that were most susceptible to manipulation through appeals to their vanity, fears, or desires for social acceptance. Guests who demonstrated excessive curiosity about the manor's operations or expressed concerns about their treatment plans were managed through carefully calibrated combinations of reassurance, distraction, and subtle intimidation that discouraged further inquiry. The manor's library had been stocked with medical texts and health journals that supported Helena's claims about revolutionary treatment methods while avoiding any information that might educate guests about conventional medical practices or ethical standards. Guests were encouraged to research their conditions and treatment options using these carefully curated resources, which consistently directed them toward conclusions that supported Helena's recommendations for extended stays and experimental procedures. The library also contained numerous testimonials from previous guests who had experienced miraculous recoveries, though careful readers might have noticed that these accounts lacked specific details about follow-up care or long-term outcome. The social activities at Ashford Manor included evening gatherings where guests could share their experiences and form friendships that would make their time at the facility more enjoyable while providing Helena with additional insights into their personalities and relationships. These sessions often featured entertainment provided by visiting musicians and performers who had been selected for their ability to create atmospheres of relaxation and trust that would make guests more receptive to Helena's suggestions about their treatment plans. Wine and spirits were served in carefully measured quantities that would promote sociability without impairing guests' judgment enough to raise suspicions about their vulnerability. Mrs. Whitmore had thrived in the Manor's social environment, forming friendships with other guests who appreciated her generosity and genuine concern for their welfare. Her willingness to share her own health concerns and listen sympathetically to others' medical challenges had made her popular among both patients and wellness guests, creating a network of relationships that would make her eventual disappearance more noticeable to the remaining residents. Helena had recognized this development as a complication that would require careful management to prevent Mrs. Whitmore's fate from alerting other guests to the true nature of the Manor's operations. The gradual escalation of Mrs. Whitmore's treatment program had been accomplished through techniques that made each new procedure seem like a logical progression from previous interventions rather than steps toward an ultimate goal that would end with her death. Helena had begun with non-invasive treatments that produced immediate improvements in the widow's energy levels and digestive function, building trust and enthusiasm for more complex procedures that would be required later. Blood tests and physical examinations had become increasingly frequent and comprehensive, presented as necessary monitoring for the experimental treatments that were producing such remarkable results. The implementation of isolation protocols for guests approaching the final stages of their treatment programs required sophisticated deception to avoid alerting other residents to the disappearance of individuals who had become integral parts of the Manor's social community. Helena had developed cover stories that explained the sudden absence of guests as temporary relocations to specialized treatment facilities or urgent departures to address family emergencies that required immediate attention. These explanations were supported by forged correspondence and manufactured evidence that discouraged further inquiry while maintaining the fiction that departed guests were continuing their recovery in other locations. The training of the Manor staff to support these deception operations had been accomplished through a combination of generous financial incentives, subtle intimidation, and careful selection of individuals whose own circumstances made them dependent on Helena's continued protection. Mrs. Blackwood had proven particularly effective at managing newer staff members who might question unusual procedures or inconsistencies in the stories surrounding departed guests. The head nurse's ability to project authority and competence while discouraging excessive curiosity had been essential for maintaining the stability of Helena's operation. The expansion of the wellness program to accommodate larger numbers of guests had required additional staff and facilities, while maintaining the intimate atmosphere that made the Manor attractive to wealthy clients seeking personalized attention. Helena had overseen construction of additional guest suites and treatment rooms that preserved the luxurious aesthetic of the original facilities, while incorporating hidden features that would support her harvesting operations. Secret passages and concealed monitoring systems allowed staff to observe guests without their knowledge, while soundproof chambers ensured that any disturbances related to harvesting procedures would not alert other residents. The financial success of the wellness facade had exceeded Helena's initial projections, with guests willingly paying enormous sums for treatments that they believed represented the pinnacle of medical innovation and luxury service. The combination of legitimate health improvements and sophisticated psychological manipulation had created a customer base that actively promoted the Manor's services to their social networks, generating referrals that eliminated the need for any external advertising or marketing efforts. Word-of-mouth recommendations from satisfied customers had proven more effective than any commercial promotion could have been. The psychological transformation that Helena had undergone during the implementation of her wellness facade had been as dramatic as the physical changes she had made to the Manor itself. The process of deceiving trusting guests while planning their eventual harvesting had required her to develop emotional detachment and manipulative skills that went far beyond anything she had learned during her medical training. She had discovered capabilities for deception and exploitation that surprised even herself, recognizing that her success depended not only on surgical expertise, but also on her ability to inspire trust and affection in individuals whom she intended to murder for their organ. As the third phase of Helena's operation reached its full development, Ashford Manor had achieved a perfect balance between legitimate medical services and criminal enterprise that allowed both aspects of the business to flourish. without interference. The wellness facade had become so convincing that even some members of Helena's own staff genuinely believed they were participating in revolutionary healthcare rather than systematic murder. The foundation had been established for expansion into international markets where similar facilities could replicate the manor's success, while providing Helena with access to even larger populations of potential organ sources and wealthy customers seeking impossible medical miracles. The basement levels of Ashford Manor had evolved far beyond their original purpose as hidden medical facilities, transforming into the administrative center of an organ trafficking network that extended across multiple countries and involved dozens of accomplices operating under Helena's increasingly sophisticated coordination. What had begun as a local operation serving wealthy patients in the Yorkshire countryside had grown into an international enterprise that supplied organs to aristocratic families throughout Europe, while maintaining the appearance of legitimate medical practice through carefully constructed networks of front organizations and corrupt officials. The expansion of the basement complex had been accomplished through a series of construction projects that had gradually extended the underground facilities to encompass nearly the entire footprint of the manor above, while adding additional levels that reached depths of almost 40 feet below ground. The engineering challenges involved in this expansion had required the services of specialists whose expertise came with absolute guarantees of discretion. Individuals whose own criminal backgrounds made them ideal partners for Helena's increasingly ambitious projects. The resulting facility represented a masterpiece of clandestine architecture that combined maximum functional efficiency with complete concealment from outside observation. The central hub of Helena's underground empire was a sophisticated command center where she could monitor the status of organ inventory, coordinate transportation schedules, and manage communications with clients and suppliers across Europe. Multiple telegraph lines connected the manor to operatives in major cities, allowing for real-time coordination of harvesting schedules with customer demands, while maintaining the rapid response times necessary for organ transplantation procedures. Detailed records were maintained of tissue compatibility profiles for hundreds of potential donors, creating a database that allowed Helena to match organs with recipients with unprecedented precision and efficiency. The organ storage facilities had been expanded to include specialized preservation chambers designed for different types of organs, each maintained at optimal temperatures and atmospheric conditions to maximize viability during extended storage periods. Helena's advances in preservation chemistry had allowed her to maintain harvested organs in transplantable condition for weeks rather than the hours that limited conventional medical practice, providing the flexibility necessary to coordinate complex international operations while ensuring optimal outcomes for paying customers. These preservation techniques represented genuine scientific breakthroughs that could have revolutionized legitimate medicine if they had been developed through ethical research rather than criminal experimentation. The holding facilities for living donors represented the most disturbing aspect of Helena's expanded operation, featuring dozens of individual cells where healthy individuals could be maintained in optimal physical condition while awaiting harvesting procedures. These chambers had been designed to provide basic comfort and sanitation while preventing escape or communication with the outside world, creating a human warehouse where potential organ sources could be stored like inventory until their services were required. The psychological techniques used to manage these captive donors ranged from sophisticated mind control methods to chemical sedation that kept them compliant without damaging the organs that would eventually be harvested. Dr. Marcus Pemberton had been Helena's first attempt at recruiting medical professionals who could assist with the expanded scale of her operations, while providing legitimacy for activities that might attract unwanted attention from authorities or professional colleagues. The young surgeon had been struggling to establish his practice in London when Helena had offered him opportunities to participate in revolutionary medical procedures that would advance his career, while providing substantial financial compensation. His initial involvement had been limited to assisting with legitimate transplant procedures, but gradually he had been drawn deeper into the criminal aspects of Helena's operation through a combination of financial incentives and carefully orchestrated compromises that made retreat increasingly difficult. The recruitment of additional medical staff had been accomplished through Helena's growing network of contacts in major European cities. Individuals who could identify surgeons, nurses, and technicians whose personal circumstances made them vulnerable to offers that combined professional advancement with moral compromise. Many of these recruits had been struggling with debt, professional failures, or personal scandals that had damaged their reputations within legitimate medical communities. Helena had proven remarkably skilled at identifying and exploiting these vulnerabilities, creating a workforce of medical professionals who were entirely dependent on her continued protection and success. The transportation network that Helena had developed for moving organs and donors across international borders represented a logistical achievement that rivaled the complexity of legitimate commercial operations. Specially modified carriages and wagons had been designed to maintain optimal preservation conditions during extended journeys, while carefully cultivated relationships with customs officials and border guards ensured that cargo would not be subject to inspections that might reveal its true nature. The network included safe houses and temporary storage facilities in major cities where organs could be held during complex international deliveries. The clientele for Helena's services had expanded beyond individual wealthy patients to include entire royal families and noble houses, whose genetic conditions required ongoing medical intervention that conventional physicians could not provide. The Habsburg family had become regular customers for organs needed to address the hereditary ailments that resulted from centuries of intermarriage, while the Bourbon dynasty had contracted for specialized procedures designed to extend the lives of aging monarchs, whose deaths would create succession crises. These high-profile clients provided not only substantial profits but also political protection that made Helena's operation virtually immune to interference from law enforcement authorities. The development of specialized harvesting procedures for different customer requirements had pushed Helena's surgical skills into territories that challenged conventional understanding of human anatomy and physiology. Requests for specific organ combinations, age-matched tissue samples, and exotic procedures that had never been attempted by legitimate medical practitioners had forced her to become an innovator in surgical techniques that existed nowhere in medical literature. These advances had been achieved through experimentation on living subjects who provided opportunities for trial and error learning that would have been impossible under ethical research conditions. The psychological management of long-term captives in the holding facilities had required Helena to develop expertise in mind control techniques that went far beyond conventional medical knowledge. Chemical compounds derived from rare plants and synthetic preparations had been used to maintain subjects in states of compliant docility while preserving their physical health and organ quality. These substances had been tested and refined through systematic experimentation that treated human subjects as laboratory animals, with successful formulations being documented for future use, while failed experiments resulted in the disposal of damaged subjects who were no longer suitable for harvesting. Lady Catherine Ashworth had been among the first long-term captives held in Helena's expanded facilities, having been acquired through a carefully orchestrated kidnapping that had been disguised as a disappearance during foreign travel. The young aristocrat possessed rare blood characteristics that made her organs extremely valuable for customers with specific genetic conditions, but her high social status had required Helena to maintain her in optimal condition for extended periods while waiting for suitable buyers to be identified. The psychological techniques used to manage Lady Catherine had included elaborate deceptions designed to convince her that she was recovering from a serious illness rather than being held captive for eventual organ harvesting. The expansion of Helena's operation into continental Europe had been facilitated by partnerships with criminal organizations that could provide access to potential donors from lower social classes whose disappearances would attract minimal attention from authorities. These collaborations had been structured to provide Helena with steady supplies of healthy young people, while giving her criminal partners access to the wealthy customer base that she had cultivated through her medical reputation. The arrangements had proven mutually beneficial, with Helena's growing profits allowing her to offer increasingly generous compensation for services that supported her expanding enterprise. The technological innovations developed for Helena's operation had included communication systems that allowed for secure coordination between facilities across multiple countries, transportation methods that could move sensitive cargo without detection, and preservation techniques that enabled organ storage and transport over unprecedented distances and time periods. These advances had been achieved through substantial investments in research and development that had attracted some of Europe's most talented inventors and scientists, individuals who had been drawn to the project by the combination of intellectual challenges and financial rewards that Helena could offer. The training programs developed for Helena's growing workforce had created standardized procedures for every aspect of the organ trafficking operation, from donor acquisition and management to harvesting techniques and customer service protocols. New recruits underwent extensive education in the technical skills required for their specific roles, while also receiving indoctrination in the philosophical principles that Helena used to justify her activities. These training programs had been designed to create loyalty and commitment, while eliminating moral reservations that might interfere with operational efficiency. The financial management of Helena's expanding enterprise had required the development of sophisticated accounting systems that could track revenues and expenses across multiple countries, while concealing the true nature of the business from tax authorities and regulatory agencies. Partnerships with corrupt bankers and government officials had provided access to international financial networks that allowed profits to be laundered through legitimate investments and business ventures. The resulting financial empire had made Helena one of the wealthiest individuals in Europe, while providing resources for continued expansion of her operations. The intelligence-gathering capabilities that Helena had developed to support her operation included networks of informants who could identify potential customers and donors while monitoring law enforcement activities that might threaten the security of her enterprise. These intelligence operations had been integrated with existing criminal organizations and corrupt government officials who could provide advance warning of investigations or regulatory changes that might require operational modifications. The resulting information network had made Helena's operation virtually immune to surprise raids or unexpected legal challenges. The quality control systems implemented throughout Helena's network had ensured that harvested organs met the exacting standards required by wealthy customers who expected perfect results from their expensive medical procedures. Rigorous testing protocols had been developed for evaluating organ quality, compatibility assessments, and preservation effectiveness, while customer feedback systems had been established to monitor satisfaction and identify areas for improvement. These quality assurance measures had been essential for maintaining the reputation that attracted high-value clients while commanding premium prices for Helena's services. The research and development activities conducted within Helena's facilities had produced genuine advances in medical science that could have benefited humanity if they had been developed through ethical means rather than criminal experimentation. Breakthrough discoveries in organ preservation, tissue compatibility, and surgical techniques had emerged from the unlimited opportunities for human experimentation that Helena's operation provided. These advances had been carefully documented and could potentially be adapted for legitimate medical use, though their origins in systematic murder and human trafficking would forever taint their potential contributions to medical knowledge. As the fourth phase of Helena's operation reached its full scope and complexity, the underground empire beneath Ashford Manor had become the center of a criminal network that influenced medical practice, political decisions, and economic activities across multiple countries. The transformation from a local organ harvesting operation into an international enterprise had been accomplished through Helena's unique combination of medical expertise, criminal innovation, and ruthless determination to achieve results regardless of moral constraint. The foundation had been established for even more ambitious projects that would ultimately challenge the fundamental principles that governed human society and medical ethics. The culmination of Dr. Helena Ashford's decade-long transformation from respected physician to Europe's most successful organ trafficking mastermind would be marked by her most ambitious project yet: the systematic replacement of her own aging organs with perfectly matched specimens harvested from carefully selected young donors. At 52 years of age, Helena had begun to notice the subtle signs of physical decline that reminded her of her own mortality, a realization that drove her to apply the same ruthless efficiency that had built her criminal empire to the challenge of achieving personal immortality through medical intervention. The planning for Helena's comprehensive organ replacement procedure had begun 2 years earlier, when she had first detected irregularities in her heart rhythm that suggested the beginning of cardiovascular decline. Rather than accepting these changes as natural consequences of aging, she had immediately begun identifying potential donors whose organs would provide optimal compatibility for her own physiological requirements. The process had required extensive testing of her own tissue characteristics, while simultaneously evaluating hundreds of potential candidates to find individuals whose organs would integrate seamlessly into her body. The selection of donors for Helena's personal procedures had been conducted with even greater precision than the careful evaluation processes she used for her wealthy customers. Each potential candidate had been subjected to months of medical monitoring and testing to ensure that their organs were not only compatible but also superior to Helena's own aging systems. The psychological profiles of these selected individuals had been equally important, as Helena needed donors who could be maintained in optimal condition for extended periods while remaining unaware of their ultimate fate. Miss Victoria Pemberton, a 19-year-old aristocrat whose family had fallen into financial difficulties, had been identified as the ideal candidate to provide Helena with a new heart. The young woman's cardiovascular system had been evaluated as absolutely perfect, with no hereditary conditions or lifestyle factors that might compromise long-term performance. Her social isolation following her family's disgrace had made her an ideal target for recruitment to the Manor's wellness program, where she could be maintained in optimal health while Helena prepared for the harvesting procedure. Master James Whitmore, the 22-year-old son of a disgraced nobleman, had been selected to provide Helena with kidney and liver replacements that would restore her metabolic functions to youthful efficiency. His excellent health and genetic background had been matched by psychological vulnerability that made him susceptible to the manipulation techniques that Helena's staff had perfected over years of managing unwilling donors. The young man's desperate financial circumstances had made him eager to accept the generous compensation offered for participating in what he believed were revolutionary medical experiments. The construction of specialized surgical facilities for Helena's personal procedures had required modifications to the basement complex that would accommodate the most complex medical operations ever attempted in a clandestine setting. Multiple operating theaters had been configured to allow for simultaneous organ removal and transplantation procedures, while advanced life support systems had been installed to maintain Helena's vital functions during the extended surgical procedures that would be required for comprehensive organ replacement. The preservation and monitoring equipment represented the pinnacle of medical technology available in the late 18th century, much of it acquired through her criminal network's connections with the most innovative medical researchers in Europe. The recruitment of additional medical professionals for Helena's personal surgical team had been accomplished through a combination of substantial financial incentives and carefully orchestrated blackmail schemes that ensured absolute loyalty and discretion. Marcus Pemberton had been promoted to senior surgeon for the project, his years of involvement in Helena's criminal activities having eliminated any possibility of ethical objections to the planned procedures. Additional specialists had been brought in from across Europe, each selected for their expertise in specific aspects of organ transplantation, while their personal circumstances made them dependent on Helena's continued protection. The scheduling of Helena's comprehensive organ replacement had been coordinated with a massive expansion of harvesting operations designed to provide organs for a backlog of wealthy customers whose procedures had been delayed to ensure that Helena's personal needs received absolute priority. The resulting surge in activity had required the acquisition of dozens of additional donors through the criminal networks that supplied Helena's operation, creating opportunities for the largest harvesting operation in the organization's history, while generating profits that would fund Helena's continued expansion into new territories. The preliminary procedures for Helena's organ replacement had begun months before the actual surgical operations, with careful conditioning designed to optimize her body's ability to integrate new organs, while minimizing the risks associated with such extensive surgical intervention. Chemical treatments had been used to suppress her immune system responses that might reject transplanted organs, while physical conditioning programs had been implemented to ensure that her body would be capable of surviving the trauma associated with multiple major surgical procedures performed in rapid succession. The donors selected for Helena's procedures had been maintained in specialized holding facilities where their physical condition could be monitored and optimized through carefully controlled diets, exercise regimens, and medical treatments designed to ensure that their organs would provide maximum benefit when transplanted into Helena's body. The psychological management of these donors had required sophisticated deception techniques that convinced them they were participating in beneficial medical research rather than awaiting execution for the convenience of their captor. The beginning of Helena's final harvest had been timed to coincide with a carefully orchestrated investigation by corrupt government officials who had been paid to discover evidence of illegal activities at competing medical facilities throughout Europe. These coordinated raids had eliminated several rival operations while creating public outcry that diverted attention from Helena's own activities and provided cover for the massive scale of operations required for her personal procedures. The resulting chaos in European medical circles had actually increased demand for Helena's services while eliminating potential competition. The surgical procedures for Helena's organ replacement had been conducted over a period of 3 weeks, with each operation carefully scheduled to allow for optimal recovery periods, while maintaining the viability of harvested organs through Helena's advanced preservation techniques. The heart transplant had been performed first, utilizing techniques that Helena had perfected through years of experimentation on unwilling subjects, while incorporating innovations that represented genuine advances in surgical methodology. The success of this initial procedure had confirmed the feasibility of the comprehensive replacement program while providing Helena with immediate improvements in cardiovascular function. The kidney and liver replacement procedures had followed within days of the heart transplant, taking advantage of Helena's enhanced cardiovascular capacity to support the additional surgical trauma associated with multiple organ replacements. The surgical techniques employed had combined traditional methods with experimental approaches that had been developed through Helena's criminal activities, resulting in procedures that achieved results impossible through conventional medical practice. The integration of new organs into Helena's body had been facilitated by chemical treatments that promoted healing while suppressing immune responses that might have caused rejection. The recovery period following Helena's comprehensive organ replacement had been managed through protocols that had been developed and refined through years of experience with post-surgical care for Helena's customers. Advanced monitoring systems had tracked her physiological responses while chemical treatments had been administered to optimize healing and prevent complications that might have threatened the success of the procedure. The psychological impact of the successful operations had been as significant as the physical benefits, confirming Helena's belief that any medical challenge could be overcome through sufficient resources and determination. The disposal of the donors who had provided organs for Helena's procedures had been accomplished through methods that had been perfected over years of criminal activity, ensuring that no evidence would remain to connect their disappearances with activities at Ashford Manor. The specialized cremation facilities that had been constructed in the basement complex had been designed to eliminate organic materials completely, while recovering valuable metals and other substances that could be recycled for future use. The efficiency of these disposal methods had been essential for maintaining the secrecy that protected Helena's operation from detection by authorities. The immediate aftermath of Helena's successful organ replacement had been marked by a surge in demand for her services from wealthy customers who had learned of her achievement through carefully controlled information networks. The demonstration that comprehensive organ replacement was possible had attracted inquiries from royal families and noble houses whose members were facing age-related decline or hereditary medical conditions that could potentially be addressed through similar procedures. The resulting increase in business had provided resources for further expansion of Helena's operations while establishing her reputation as the only physician capable of achieving true medical miracles. The investigation that had been launched by several European governments into the disappearances of numerous young aristocrats had been expertly managed through Helena's network of corrupt officials and political allies who had been positioned to control and misdirect official inquiries. Evidence had been fabricated to suggest that the missing individuals had been victims of foreign kidnapping rings or had voluntarily departed for new lives in distant countries, while witnesses who might have provided accurate information had been either recruited into Helena's organization or eliminated through methods that appeared accidental or natural. The expansion of Helena's operations following her successful organ replacement had included the establishment of additional facilities in major European cities, each designed to provide the same combination of legitimate medical services and criminal harvesting operations that had proven so successful at Ashford Manor. The standardized procedures and training programs that had been developed over years of experience had allowed these new facilities to begin operations immediately, while maintaining the quality standards that Helena's wealthy customers had come to expect. The technological innovations that had emerged from Helena's personal surgical procedures had included advances in organ preservation, surgical techniques, and post-operative care that represented genuine contributions to medical science, albeit discoveries that had been achieved through methods that violated every principle of medical ethics. These innovations had been carefully documented and could potentially revolutionize legitimate medical practice, though their origins in systematic murder and human trafficking would forever taint their acceptance by ethical practitioners. The financial success of Helena's expanded operations had made her one of the wealthiest individuals in Europe, while providing resources for continued innovation and growth that would extend her influence far beyond the medical field. Investments in legitimate businesses and political activities had created a network of interests that made her virtually immune to legal challenges, while providing cover for continued criminal activities. The resulting power and influence had transformed Helena from a simple criminal into a figure whose activities shaped political and economic decisions across multiple countries. The psychological transformation that Helena had undergone during her journey from physician to criminal mastermind had been completed through the success of her personal organ replacement procedures, which had confirmed her belief that conventional moral and ethical constraints were obstacles to achieving true greatness. The demonstration that she could overcome even the limitations of human mortality through the systematic exploitation of others had eliminated any remaining doubts about the correctness of her chosen path, while inspiring even more ambitious projects for the future. The legacy of Helena's achievements had been carefully preserved through detailed documentation that would allow her methods and innovations to be reproduced and expanded by future generations of practitioners who shared her vision of medicine unconstrained by ethical limitations. Secret training facilities had been established where selected students could learn the techniques that Helena had developed, while being indoctrinated in the philosophical principles that justified their application to human subjects who were viewed as resources rather than individuals deserving of more consideration. As Helena approached her 60th birthday with the physical vitality of someone half her age, the success of her comprehensive organ replacement had inspired plans for even more ambitious projects that would challenge the fundamental assumptions about human limitations and possibilities. The techniques she had developed could potentially be applied to achieving not merely extended life, but genuine immortality through systematic replacement of aging body parts with superior alternatives harvested from carefully selected donors. The underground empire she had created would continue to grow and evolve, spreading her influence across continents while establishing new standards for what could be achieved when human ambition was freed from the constraints of conventional morality. The final triumph of Dr. Helena Ashford represented not merely the success of an individual criminal enterprise, but the emergence of a new paradigm for human achievement that would influence the development of medical science and human society for generations to come. Her victory over death itself had been purchased through the systematic exploitation and murder of hundreds of innocent victims, Yet the results she had achieved would forever stand as testimony to the power of determined genius to overcome any obstacle, regardless of the moral cost involved in achieving such unprecedented success.